So a lot of people ask me, what on earth am I going to be talking about? And I said elephants. So now I'm finally going to explain what this was all about. I have a question for you first, though. Raise your hands if you have a favourite animal. Raise them nice and high if you have a favourite animal. Excellent. Put them down. So I'm not on my own. That's good to know. Well, mine is the magnificent, the gargantuan, and the majestic elephant. I've always felt a strange and strong affinity to this creature, but for years I couldn't quite put my finger on why. And I'll make this disclaimer from the start. This will not be a meditation on the rights of the elephant. I think I need a whole other TED talk for that. But I do think that there are many lessons to be learnt from the elephant kingdom and what is happening to it. I've come to see the image of the elephant as a metaphor in my life and an important recurring motif in my work. And there are many urban myths surrounding the elephant. One such urban myth teaches us that elephants are wise, merciful, have long memories, and display an almost human-like capacity to empathize and show sorrow. And this is no coincidence, I guess. There is evidence that strongly suggests elephants are some of the most intelligent creatures on the planet, with cognitive abilities that rival even creatures such as dolphins and apes, who are highly regarded as intelligent also. Elephants are highly social, family and community-orientated, and altruistic, seemingly greatly concerned with the well-being of others in their herd. And they display an almost human-like capacity to grieve and feel sorrow upon the death of a herds member, even going so far as to cover the deceased with branches and leaves and dirt, whilst remaining at their loved one's side for several days. Yes, the elephant seems to have its own burial ritual. Surprising? Maybe. But don't take my word for it. A quick browse on YouTube or National Geographic or the Discovery Channel will show you a number of fascinating facts and observations about this remarkable creature. However, it's no secret that ongoing illegal poaching and extensive habitat loss over the last decades have created an increasingly turbulent and difficult environment for generations of elephants to navigate. So, attempt the slide. Okay. So in August 2014, National Geographic reported that as many as 100,000 elephants were killed by poachers in just 3 years. And alongside this, there have been an increasing number of reports of unprovoked and lethal elephant attacks on humans across the vast continent of Africa, in India, and also in places across Southeast Asia. And biologists and other experts believe that this abnormal aggression to be potentially an unforeseen side effect of extreme abuse, exploitation, and violation of these creatures by humans. And the repeat trauma of witnessing parents, children, family members, and loved ones, and other members of the herd being violently killed and mutilated over time interrupts the natural development of the elephant brain, causing signs of something akin to post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is particularly evident in the calf population, young elephants. Much like humans, young elephants need guidance. They need love, they need attention, and they need nurturing. Children need their parents, and youngers need their elders. And a once altruistic species with close familial bonds and exceptional levels of emotional intelligence and almost human-like qualities finds itself driven towards extinction and in mental, societal, and intellectual decline. So why have I told you all of this, you're probably wondering? Well, as I said at the beginning, there is much to learn from the experience of the elephant kingdom, in my opinion. The suffering of the elephant reminds me of the suffering of many considered the other, with a capital O. Those who find themselves on the very margins of societies. The person who is poor, the person who is differently abled, the person who is queer, the person who is black, the person who is brown, the person who is female, non-binary, trans, or any number of things, the list goes on. But moving away from the elephant for a moment, I think it's important for me to tell you that I'm somewhat of a creative busybody and a bit of an extracurricular freak, quite honestly. And I have a portfolio career. So I'm quintessentially of the millennial generation, I'd like to think. And people often ask me what it is that I do exactly, or rather what I don't do. Well, I am a writer, I am a blogger, a freelance journalist, a community organizer, a producer, a poet, a performer, a publisher, a founder, a social media enthusiast, a dreamer, and a doer. And all the various different aspects of the work that I do, as far as I am concerned, are inextricably intertwined. And at the heart of all I do is creativity and working towards social justice, or something I like to call artivism. And I've especially found comfort in my work as a poet and the work I do with young people. I found comfort in building platforms and curating spaces for the most marginalized to take up space, to be heard, and to be visible, and to move from the margins to the center. And I found comfort and purpose in bringing people together, creating networks and communities and building bridges, connecting the dots. In such uncertain times as those that we are currently living in, the work I do feels especially vital. And I am often applauded for my seemingly endless reserves of energy and my commitment to creating meaningful change and being part of that process. But what's often not spoken about is how exhausting it can be. So I was actually particularly tired in 2016, I'm sure quite a few of us were. Tired of mourning people I did not know. Tired of people whose names became Twitter hashtags and Facebook videos, tired of mourning them. People who we now speak about in the past tense. People whose lives were prematurely snatched from them by injustice and indifference. People who were murdered at the hands of the police. People who drowned trying to find safety after fleeing from conflict in former homes that were now unsafe. I was tired of people who simply wanted to have their humanity recognized being snatched from us. I was tired. And I expressed my grief and fatigue through poetry, really the only way I knew how. To be a poet, you have to feel things deeply, and I do. You have to have a preoccupation with the world and the people who exist in it and what happens in it. And in the darkest of times, it can be especially difficult to believe that the suffering will end and that grief will subside and that infinite good in the world will triumph. And in the most challenging of times, it can be truly difficult to place one's head above the parapet and see beyond the status quo. But to do so takes courage and often sacrifice. Activist, scholar, and general inspirational human, Angela Davis, in her latest work, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, touches on how oppression, one of the cruel realities of oppression is that it often makes us feel that we cannot reimagine the future or look to new and better beginnings. And I'd say that she is right. And what happens when we cannot envisage the future? Well, the present and the past become all that we have and all that we know. And in response to all the turmoil that took place in 2016, I decided the theme for all the work I do this year had to be reimagining. I had to look forward. I challenged myself to be a maker of the future and step outside of what was familiar. The Black British Feminist platform I created in 2013, not long after I graduated from university, helped me do this. And already this year, No Fly on the Wall and the No Fly on the Wall Academy, a place where Black British women and Black women living in the UK are centred. We have already reimagined Black love and its infinite possibilities. We've reimagined the transformative possibilities of anger as a necessary fuel for change-making, innovation, and action. And I have been able to ask myself what I really want and need society to look like and be for myself and others like me and even those unlike me. And through this work of reimagining, I have also been able to think about how the collective body can drive meaningful change together from the bottom up. And in May 2016, as I said, 2016 was a pretty eventful year. In May 2016, I released my debut collection of poetry called Elephant. Elephant is a meditation on Black British womanhood, identity, a documentation of migration, a confession, a confrontation, a documentation of migration, a confession, a confrontation, and a love letter to my growing up and my girlhood in southeast London and my school days in Elephant and Castle. It is a critique of our society and how we treat those often characterized as the other, with a capital O. And in 37 poems, I addressed the elephants in the room, longing to be confronted, and I came face to face with some very difficult truths. And the ultimate message of this body of work is defiance, resilience, reclamation, strength, and most of all, remembrance. Oh, we've gone back to the beginning. Okay. So I said remembrance, remembering how to use this as something special. Remembering what happened to you, remembering how it made you feel, and remembering how you grieved, remembering how you rejoiced, and remembering how you survived, and remembering how you forged a new future and a new beginning, not defined by the things that hurt you, but informed by the lessons you've learned and those experiences that those things have taught you. But now back to the humble elephant for a moment. So, the trajectory of the elephant society teaches us what happens when oppression and trauma go on for too long, in my opinion. And there will eventually be a clapback. And the clapback will be forceful, unexpected, surprising, and uncontainable. And even the most altruistic and merciful among us will reach a point where we have to say enough is enough to those that abuse, disrespect, hurt, violate, and oppress us. And to those who remain apathetic and silent as well. As the elephant has proven to be a wonderfully poignant metaphor for life, power, strength, struggle, love, loss, grace, and ultimately consequence, I suppose it was only right that my first full body of work would be called Elephant. And just thinking about 2016, and I suppose really the years preceding it, and even the first few months of 2017, the words global crisis spring to mind. But as journalist, writer, and former editor-in-chief of Essence, Susan L. Taylor says, in every crisis there is a message. Crises are nature's way of forcing change, breaking down old structures, shaking loose negative habits, and so that something new and better can take their place. And I can't help but think that she's right. They say that things get worse before they get better. However, to respond to nature's demands for radical, meaningful change takes courage, just as I said earlier. And on this notion of courage, the late and great Maya Angelou reminded us that courage is the most important of all the virtues. Because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage. And to push one's head above the parapet and commit yourself to being part of meaningful change or challenging the status quo and deeply concerning yourself with others and their well-being and concerning yourself with what happens in society and those on the margins of it and using your voice even when it trembles takes a great amount of courage. So, I'm keeping it short and sweet, I'd like to think. As I said, my name is Siana Bangura, and I'm a writer, a blogger, a freelance journalist, a community organizer, a producer, a poet, a performer, a publisher, a founder, a social media enthusiast, a dreamer, a doer. I'm an agitator, and I'm courageous. And elephants are my favorite animal. Thank you.